Hello and welcome everyone to Open Office Hours. This is a time where we get together to break down different startup concepts to help you gain traction in the most important parts of your business. And today we're going to talk about the symptoms of a weak go-to-market strategy and what you can do about it to make it better. And if you're like a Series A or B startup, it's really not too late to redefine your go-to-market strategy, and you can get better results and make a really big impact on your growth because it impacts a lot of different things within your product and how it impacts your customers. And I'll start off introducing myself here. My name is Jacob Miller. I'm the marketing and brand manager at Headway. I help host events like this, and I engage on social. So if you're asking questions in YouTube or Twitter or wherever, I'm the person usually replying. So hello, and thanks for joining us. I'll hand it over to Andrew.
Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, Andrew Verbencore, partner and CEO here at Headway, and looking forward to digging into this. Obviously, this is building upon what we did in the Ready to Scale series, and looking forward to digging in here with Ryan.
Good. Welcome, everybody. Ryan Hatch, head of product here at Headway. And yeah, excited to kind of unpack go-to-market together and hope you guys stay engaged and submit questions and make it into a conversation. So yeah, glad to be on Open Office Hours today. We'll jump in and kind of talk through the first video in the Ready to Scale series on go-to-market. We'll just kind of unpack the high-level story, and then we'll dive into questions and feel free to submit those. So go-to-market strategy. I know not all of us use the same kind of terms and terminology and language, but we'll kind of give you our definition of go-to-market as we get in here. So the first thing is that there's many components of a go-to-market strategy. One of them is obviously who you're targeting, right? The customers, the market, as well as what you're selling, what your offering is, your product, and also how you're delivering. This includes channels, how you go to market, how you reach them, and actually delivering on that. So these three main components of go-to-market strategy we're going to talk about right now is the who and the what, the market and the product. Now you have a product, and you're trying to penetrate the market, right? You're trying to get traction and really get this out there. Now it depends on where your company is specifically, if you're pre-product market fit, if you're post-product market fit, if you're what stage you're at. But really, you're always trying to grow, and there's always investor pressure to keep that growth going. We often talk to growth stage startups, and they're under serious investor pressure to do 2x, 3x revenue just this year, right, or more, up to 5x. So there's a lot of pressure to go from this smaller slice of the market where you're not well known yet. You have a few, really great customers, but you really need to penetrate that market, and you really need to push that product further and deeper into that market. The challenge is we actually think it's not this. It's not. We often think of a pie slice, and we just need to penetrate. We think of it differently. Instead of thinking of it like a pie, we think of it like are these different contexts. There's many different customer segments, and each of these people have each of these customer types have different needs. You'll see that some of them are green here, some of them are yellow, orange, some of them are red. And so there's some people that really, really are finding great success with your product, and they're doing, really, really well, and they're giving you rave reviews. They're the ones you're writing case studies with. And there's people that actually, evaluate it, take a look at it, don't use it. They drop off in the first month. They don't engage. There's other people in your product that are, frustrated. Like, why can't it do this? Asking for more features. Why can't it do that? And just like mismatched expectations, right? And all of these, you're getting different responses, whether it's high NPS, low NPS, however you're measuring that. Your gut feeling, you often know that this is happening. And we think about this, it's like they're in different spots. They're responding to your product and your value prop differently because they have different needs. And these needs are an indicator that you actually have different contexts. What you'll see often happening is that some of the customers are asking for to add these features onto your product. So you're thinking about, okay, I got to add these features to get the next sale, right? These other customer types in this different customer segment, they're asking for yet different features. And you have others that are asking for even different features than that. And what happens is is you thought that you were going to be penetrating the market really, like we need to grow 2x, we need to just expand and just let's light this thing on fire now that we have some initial market traction. But what often happens, what we see inside these high growth startups, is that penetrating the market really results in broadening your audience and talking to too many different types of customers. You got a lot of different types of customers. And what actually happens is those different customer contacts actually push back on you, push back on your product, push back on your product teams. And the product teams feel a lot of pressure to, well, which features do we build now and later, and which customers do we prioritize? And not everyone's asking for the same thing. And now we have to have these trade-off conversations and make promises for certain dates. And different customers are asking for different things. And so we kind of like to think of these again as market segments. And the problem here is that not all the market segments have the same size, right? Some customer segments are bigger and smaller, and the customers that you might be really resonating really well with right now and might be having great success in those case studies we talked about, they might actually be a smaller segment. The question is, what's going to get you to your growth goals? If you're under amount of high investment pressure, especially now, with the macroeconomic changes and needing to get to break even, needing to get into cash flow, right? Like you need to make sure that you're building your product to fit a market that's big enough to help you get to your growth goals, right? So, some of the customers that might be dropping off might actually be the ones you might actually need to pivot and focus on. Right. So just because you might have like a really good, resonance here, maybe that's not where you actually need to stay. So you need to start thinking about, we often kind of talk with our startup clients about is, who are we going after? And there's these positioning challenges. There's all these side effects that happen. We think about how do we get the growth we need? And we need to start looking at it from a market segmentation standpoint. So one of the ways to do this is to look at these different market segments and start to break them down. And there's lots of different ways that we suggest doing this. One of the ways is actually take a list of sample accounts. So what I would do is start off with just dumping a list of like every prospect ever in your funnel, your current clients, prospect leads, and start to bucket those by use case. Now, this assumes that you actually know what the use cases are, but that's a really good place to kind of start to get a sense of these segments and patterns. And there's many ways to group them, many ways to do that. But by use case, or we would refer to as job to be done, is a really good way to do that. Then what that allows you to do is build a segmentation list. And then you can get actually into accounts. Now, this is a B2B example where we're doing, a sales-led kind of maneuver, we're account-based marketing type stuff. But then you can actually count the number of companies in this space, like who are the competitors to Dialpad, who are the competitors to Grain or Fathom or UserInterviews.com. You can get that list, build this out, along with, what's our likelihood to close, what's our attainable, what's our likelihood to win this market segment. That kind of gives you a TAM for the number of accounts that exist, along with the contract value. Kind of gives you a rough market sizing. This is not this is bottoms up, right? So this is like real stuff, not some top down pitch deck stuff. This is really attainable stuff. And you'll see here, one of the outcomes of this slide is that in green, we're only at 7% here and 7% there. We might actually want to pivot into this 14% sales dialers market segment, just because it's a larger segment that we don't resonate with yet. But if we can shift into that, we can probably hit our growth goals. But we want to, this gives you a market sizing, but market sizing isn't the only variable here, right? Market sizing is just one of the variables. We also suggest taking a look at, how their needs fit your solution. How well does your product fit into their world and their life? What's their budget and propensity to spend? Market concentration, right? Are we going to have like a lot of revenue density if we're doing a lot of enterprise stuff, or if we're down in like SMB type land, right? What is the concentration of our revenue? What would that be? Market access. Do we have channels, partners? How easy is it to get distribution in here, as well as just the overall segment strategic attractiveness for us. So these are kind of some mental models that we would suggest considering when looking at different market segments from a market sizing and prioritization standpoint. And what you want to think about is, you want the least number of customer segments to hit your growth goals, right? So when you apply that principle down, you really get into this beachhead strategy approach. And beachhead strategy is the idea of taking a single market segment that you can be really, really successful at and focusing on that as a point of attack and expanding from there. Either maybe it's within, maybe you're expanding deeper revenue within those accounts and with like product 2 or upselling, right? Maybe that's market expansion, right? Market penetration could be looking at other similar type market segments where you only have to build one other feature, or there's other smaller changes or incremental things that you can use, and think about how do you sequence these market segments in a way that allow you to move quickly, but allow you to build these case studies that allow for repeatable sales, right? When you're in a sales process and you can't pull up a case study, it's not, well, we've kind of worked with companies like this, or you don't really have the what you need. When you're selling to all these different types of people, if you can get it down to one point of attack, that's really, really going to help with positioning, differentiation, talking to competitors, being able to pull up case studies and being referenceable in that market. So that's kind of an overview of the first things we would think about from go-to-market strategy. We have a couple of questions already coming in. So yeah, Andrew, any thoughts or feedback on kind of what we just walked through?
Yeah, if you want to head back to that beachhead strategy, I think, one of the things we talk about a lot is even if you only have one customer, I think avoiding going down to different categories, right? And even within one category, let's say you're serving alumni associations or something, based on the context and the job, this entire beachhead strategy could be, 5 of these could be alumni, but could be different jobs or contexts, really, as you think about those segments. So rather than thinking about just alumni and being like, okay, we're going to do alumni, then we're going to do, this B2B, this business, we're going to do these organizations inside of those. And that's really kind of the core part of this market segmentation is, even if it's the same customer in the same category, there are striations and levels of success that you're going to have by reaching those just by changing the context. So everything else looks the same. Demographics look the same, right? But as you get down into the weeds and the context and the job is just understanding that these aren't all necessarily different categories. These can be many of the same category with different contexts. Just wanted to point that out as a point of specificity, is that it really matters. And if you take a look through our Ready to Scale series, we go into the details of, even if they're the same customer, they're going to be successful in different ways based on that context, and that really bleeds through your whole business. Even though they look the same, many companies will be coming to you for different things, and that really makes all the difference.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we hear this all the time, where whether you're a early stage founder or even if you're Series D, we work with across all these venture funded startups, and one of the common patterns is, well, you're always pitching to investors, right? No matter what round you're at, you're always kind of telling the story and painting this future world that you want to create. And we often see, oh, this is going to be so great because we can, the market's so big, and we can, do all these amazing, spin-offs, product 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And that's great. You need that strong vision, but we often see a disconnect between the vision and how you actually get there. And it's we hear things like, oh, this can apply to everybody, and we could sell it here, and then we can sell it here. And yeah, those make for great pitch stories, I think. But that's very different than when you're in a sales conversation. Right. So that's kind of the level where, you might have a vision to get to whatever point from wherever you are now, whatever you're pitching, you're raising for. How do you make that reality? Right. There's a gap between vision and how we get there. That is the go-to-market stuff. This is all core business model things. And how do you win in the market? And it always comes down to, in a single sales conversation. And you're right, Andrew, that it's going to be, different, and there's a lot of nuances, right? If you change, who the buyer is, even at that alumni organization, that example, if you change, in an enterprise or B2B sale, there's many different buyers, right? If you change who you're talking to, it changes the pitch, it changes the value prop, it can change the pricing, it changes their perceived competitors, right? So in a sales conversation, this stuff really, really matters. Where, in an investor conversation, you can kind of get away with keeping it loose, right? Do you have a question coming in?
Yeah, looks like we have a question from Shannon here on YouTube. So whoever I can speak to it, and then you guys can answer. So have you seen people or companies target the wrong segment? And if so, how would you proceed to pivot?
Andrew, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, all the time. I think like more often than choosing the wrong segment, we see people not choose and choose all the segments, right? Or think about it kind of like Ryan showed, where, hey, it's this market and all we need to do is penetrate it and not actually get down into the weeds, which is why doing jobs research and understanding the context that people have inside your market, clients, non-clients, people, why they switch, like all those things that really gets to the root of those contexts is so helpful. So more often than not, I would see that, as the problem. And so the pivot usually is like, niching down, and you've heard that before, but, tactically, what does that mean? Well, we need to learn more about our customers. We need to understand the nuances of their journey, really define out what are those jobs or things that they're trying to achieve. And then go back to kind of like Ryan had, if you go back to the few screens here where we're going over prioritization and those different metrics in those tables, is just understanding what is the size of market, as you dig deeper into this, how does that apply to our business, and where do we want to go down and double down into? But I think either way, if you're coming from a, macro point of view where you have a whole segment, or you're in a, maybe you chose the wrong segment, you chose a bet, and now market dynamics have changed, coming back to reevaluate, like, what are all the options inside of this market? What are all the jobs we're solving really well or could solve really well? And then, start to evaluate where, which door do you go into next? And Ryan, if you have any more to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think there is this kind of desire to, like, as an entrepreneur, I think one of the temptations is to lean in and say, I want to keep all my doors open, right? But, the opposite is actually true, that you're more likely to succeed. It's, if you don't decide, which is often the case, what happens is you get diluted, right? The value prop doesn't resonate because it gets diluted and it's just more generic. And it's like, the tighter you can get it, and that's kind of the idea of prioritizing these, and picking one that's going to help you meet your growth goals, and at least sequencing them, if nothing else, right? That you're going to have something that resonates a lot better when you're talking the customer's language, when the customer is seeing. We've seen stuff resonate really well within verticals when you can mention their competitors, right? If you're too broad, you can't really do that. At least not in an automated kind of way, because then really everything's manual. You're gonna be looking up every single account because everyone you're gonna be talking to is will be coming from a different place. So I hope that helps. I think we have another question coming in too.
Yeah. So Ayush asks, who typically drives go-to-market at a Series A or B stage startup in your experience?
Yeah, I think it's a combination, right? Like, you can see what this is funny, because if I jump to one of these slides that it's just there's a lot of different mental models that I think are helpful, right? Here's another one. It's like your pipeline, right? You guys can see that, right? You got your marketing team. They're doing inbound stuff. They're trying to get MQLs. You got your sales team. If you're doing B2B, everyone here, and you have your product team, product management, right? I think everyone's involved in that. We think that something that's really important is it really, when you have, we can walk through some of the other challenges in these different specific areas. I guess I might pull some of those up. For instance, like your marketing team, marketing team feels pressure to deliver MQLs and like expanding audiences, and I need to get more leads, and that turns that, the side effects of that are like you're doing lookalike audiences, so there's a lot of different things that happen throughout the funnel when the go-to-market's not clear and everyone's being affected by it. So sales team, they're quota pressure, they're expanding their account list, and hey, which accounts do I call on if they're doing like SDR or outbound stuff or account-based marketing? How do we prioritize, or how do we rank, or how do we rate the accounts? All the way down into onboarding and churn and stuff like that. And so when you use a funnel as a model, I think that it's common to see the different departments actually all trying to solve the pieces of it for themselves. But really, there needs to be, comes down to a leadership, really like a C-level thing, is who are we going to go after and what's our value prop? These are really core business model components that you can't just delegate, let's say, right? I know that different companies are led in different ways, right? Some companies are very, very sales led. And other teams, maybe more feature led or product led. But I think it really comes down to none of these of your teams can solve this for themselves, right? It really becomes a leadership issue that needs to be kind of worked through in a collaborative manner to figure out, hey, what's the market landscape look like? Where are we winning? Where are we struggling? And really understanding what are the needs in the market. Like Andrew mentioned, the jobs to be done. All this stuff at like a really a leadership level, but also really insights into that market. Only then can you work through some of the stuff that we're talking about here and make some decisions. And once these decisions get made, that's when everything downstream, right? Because what we're talking about right now, like a lot of the stuff we're talking about is market segmentation. If this stuff isn't set up right, then it's going to flow, all that flows downstream, right? It all runs downhill. So it really becomes a leadership conversation to do this right. I don't know, Andrew, if any of that resonates with you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, we were talking about this just this morning, but the biggest thing when we think about go-to-market or when people mention it is, if you were to ask a lot of founders and teams, they might say that it's hey, what's your go-to-market strategy? Trade shows, or they'll talk about the channel a lot, but they won't really talk about all the other fits that go into it. And maybe this is a good time to bring some of that up, Ryan. But building on Brian Balfour's kind of 4 fits model, like always starting with the market. So really understanding who that customer is, what they think about, what problems they have. Like a lot of these really key questions around who we're actually serving goes into the product of, well, how do we deliver on that? What's the solution worth to them? And they all kind of start to build together. And so when you think about go-to-market strategy, it really is, we joked about it, like it's everything, because it is really your entire business model wrapped up into 4 key components with, your key value proposition at the middle. And so you do need that leadership to choose a customer, right? If you don't choose a segment or you don't go in, like your ability to reach all those different segments with a different product offering through different channels in a different business model, that's essentially, I think there's a quote that says, I'm trying to think of who it's from, Peter Thiel maybe. A lot of times, like startups don't fail from starvation, they fail from indigestion, and it's because of all of these different things at once that they're trying to consume. So just imagine like a single customer with a single product with, maybe a leading channel, 2 or 3 trailing channels, and a model that makes sense. Now amplify that if you're serving multiple segments and multiple different customers. Like, how are you going to keep that all together, especially as a early stage, high growth startup, right? Like when you think about some big brands that are, in the future, maybe IPO, they have these micro startups within them that are focusing on one customer with one product with maybe, a key channel. They can grow because they have the ability to then start hedging their bets. As a startup, like you need to really, really hone that in. So, first and foremost, probably the founders responsibility to choose the customer and ICP. And that's where we talk a little bit in our Founders Mindset series about founder market fit that really helps them to build that empathy across the team. And then, need to really keep that focus as the company grows.
I think this comment from Shannon's great though, because she does make a really good point that sometimes the go-to-market strategy might be driven by conversations with VCs because they're in control of the capital, right? So and obviously you guys have both said sometimes every organization is a little bit different. Who controls what, team structures, all that kind of thing. So it is interesting just to think about it. But I think the key is to be iterative. Like it says on the slide here, a good strategy is iterative. Like, yeah, of course you can have a good starting point, but as you're learning, like, hey, this go-to-market strategy we've been doing for 6 months, but we're finding a lot of friction. Okay, let's like revisit it and figure out like how we can get rid of that friction. And does that mean we have to target somewhere else? And then just communicating that to your VCs, like having that relationship and like communicating why clearly and all that kind of stuff is what you really need to do. Because the worst thing you can do is lock into a plan that never changes. Because that's just, as years go on, like the market changes, your customers' needs change, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and even key channels change. Like Brian, in one of Brian Balfour's forfeits models, as he talks about, is like a lot of companies become reliant on a channel while compliance changes. Like just look at the sweeping changes that happened last year with Apple and Facebook ads and all those things. If you're building a business on that strategy, it needs to adapt and overcome. And so, we actually do have a lot of conversations and do consulting with companies that have been around for 20 plus years. Not surprisingly, because like they're either struggling with go to market or they've grown to a certain point and now have to find a new place to focus. And so it is something that, you need to continuously revisit because customer expectations change based on new opportunities and new substitutes in the market, and your product's always evolving. And so it's kind of this, checks and balances where you're trying to make sure that everything's continuing to build on each other and not diverge too far.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. And as you're chasing growth, that revenue pressure, it's going to lead you into, well, what's the next thing I'm selling, right? Whether you're trying to expand your existing accounts and go deeper, or you're trying to spin up, product two, or adapt your current product to a new market. Like you're revisiting this often. You're rethinking about this because, you think, like Andrew said, some people think go to market and they just think channel, but we're kind of, riffing off of some of Brian Balfour stuff that Andrew mentioned is we really think there's 5 components of go to market strategy. And you look at these, it's mostly the business model canvas here. And the 4 being, customer and product, and that value prop, delivering on outcomes there. And also monetization is how are we making money, and channel is how are we, what's our distribution. And we really feel like, good strategy is iterative. It doesn't change. It's kind of to this point, right? And how does it iterate? Well, research informs it, and also running experiments constantly to validate, which you're probably already doing in some way on the marketing side, but does it inform, that might inform, some of the channel stuff, but really are those experiments really informing the customer and value prop and the product as well, and pricing. So yeah, this is kind of how we think about it. And all of this really feeds the product, marketing, sales teams. And I think one thing to think about when you kind of explode this, this is a little bit of deeper dive, and there's a lot more to talk about from here, but this is a very interdependent model, right? So if you change one thing, it changes everything else. So customer, product, value prop, pricing, and channel are so tightly coupled. So if you change your customer, for instance, if I change the customer, everything else around it's changing. The pricing is probably changing. The pitch is probably changing. The perceived customer set, the consideration set I'm in is changing. The price probably going to change. How distribution, how I reach them, right? So there's a lot of things here that are tightly coupled, and yeah. So I think we do have one more. Do we have one more question? Or
yeah. So, but before we jump into Tevin's question, Ayusha was asking. He's like, would these slides and Miro boards be shared at any point? And he said it would be great to dive a little deeper into them offline. So I wonder should he just go to our contact form on our site to schedule a call with one of us, and then we could walk through them with him, or because we don't really have those ready to share quite yet. So I wasn't sure what you guys thought. Like this Miro stuff that we're walking through right now.
Yeah, I'm happy to share this stuff. It's not all packaged neatly up in
So I was figuring he could
in a take-home packet. But
I'll just send him a link.
Out.
I'll send him a link in the comments where he can get a hold of us, and we can share that with him. So again, we're working on a lot more go-to-market content like this. So it's kind of in progress, and we'll definitely have more stuff in the future. So be on the lookout. But Ayush will definitely follow up with you. All right, let's jump into Tevin's question. So Tevin asked, what about an industry with multiple segments and targeting the smaller ones, but leverage those customers to attract the larger ones? So thoughts around multiple segments in that approach.
Yeah. So this is good. One thing that Andrew mentioned we think is really important is niching down. And sometimes when you do that, you feel like you're losing, right? There's an emotional kind of thing there where, oh, I thought my market was going to be, $1 billion. Now it's only 200 million or 100 million or whatever. But if you think about it, again, in terms of a beachhead strategy, that's actually really, really good because there's fewer people that talk directly to that space, right? So you can actually be highly, highly relevant. We talked about high credibility and kind of case studies that resonate and really being able to speak their language. We've seen that many, many times. We were in actually we were able to learn a new market really, really quickly. Some of our members of our team recently went from 0 to in 6 weeks or 8 weeks tops, really became an expert in the space through a lot of our discovery tactics, if you will. And so much so that we were invited to come speak to all these CEOs in this space, in this private CEO group, and got a lot of people to come talk to us afterwards, if you will. And we were able to do that in a very short period of time. So it's great because it's smaller might feel like you're losing, but it can actually be to your advantage because you become an expert quickly. Those relationships, that network is fairly small. And if you're again, this is assuming that if your product is a really great fit for them in comparison to, if you can differentiate and position really well in that space, then I think it's a great move. Again, it's what are your growth goals, right? And is that market segment going to get you to where you want to be? Now, your other kind of second half of the question was, does this smaller segment attract the larger ones? That's kind of your call. I don't really know the specifics of what niche you're kind of talking about. We have seen, Andrew, in the startups that we play in, we've played in the innovation space with, large corporates, and also in startups launching new things and growing them. It's kind of this funny thing because you have enterprises that are slow and big and bureaucratic, and they have lots of resources, but they're not very good at organizing around those. So the corporates actually want to be cool. They want to be fast. They want to be nimble, right? And they want to have really, really great talent. And so they want to be small in some way, if you can think about that. And then on the other side, the small guys want to be big, right? The small guys want to be credible. They want to have a stack of logos, and they want to be, perceived as trusted enough as a new brand, a newer company that they're worth working with, and they can be trusted. So it kind of, social credibility, what logos, or you kind of need to decide that based on your specific use case.
Awesome. I think we had a couple of questions. There was somebody that left a question in preparation for the event too. And I think there was a couple common questions that we get around go-to-market that we wanted to walk through. I don't know if Andrew, if you want to bring those up.
Yeah, let me bring that up real quick. For startups preparing to scale, how can they assess what's not working with their current go-to-market strategy? Ryan?
Yeah, for sure. I think some of the things that we think about is there's a couple different other mental models that come in helpful with this. One is, where are you in the like kind of life cycle of your startup, right? Are you in, this, but this would be whoever's asking this question, they know kind of where they're at. But here's kind of how we think about different stages of growth and what you're struggling with or what you're needing to do in these stages. It's different, and the investor expectations are different. Obviously, the level of capital you have is different. So I think it comes with diagnosing just where are we really at. I know this product market fit is this funny thing, right? It's like, are we there? Are we not there? Andrew, we were kind of talking about that before the call. It's like, what is it? And there's many ways to kind of litmus test for it. Some is like level of churn. Others, there's also, what percent of your customers would be like very disappointed if they didn't have your product anymore. There's also, unit economics or lifetime value or, payoff amounts, CAC payoff periods. There's different kind of litmus tests you can use to see kind of if where you're at. So I think that's the first thing to diagnose is, hey, am I actually at scale? And if so, that's great. It opens up another world of growth stuff we want to unpack. So I think that's the first thing, Andrew, to think about. The other one is identifying, who are you really targeting from a price standpoint, because it changes your go-to-market based on your pricing. So if you're doing, really higher end price, then you're, if I was to draw like a line here, then you're going to be doing a different sales model, right? So the sales model is going to be different, and it's going to indicate whether your sales approach is right? If you're doing outbound sales, cold SDR stuff, account-based B2B, when you're doing, 10,000 and up, 28,000 and up, or whatever, ACV, or you're doing more product-led growth, self-serve stuff, like some of these key things, and kind of just knowing where you are. I think the first thing is diagnosing the stage, right? Hey, what exactly am I from a sales model standpoint? Where am I from a growth maturity standpoint? And then that'll help you really kind of come over here and start to diagnose these different fits. And there's a lot to these different fits, but product market fit is a really, really big one, right? If your product isn't actually delivering on the value proposition, then what's wrong, right? Is the value prop actually not resonating with the customers, right? So the customer, then you're having like, maybe you're doing, they don't understand the value. The price is getting hit because they don't understand the value. Who knows? They're not comparing you in the light that you want to be seen. So is a value prop problem. Is it actually you can deliver a lot of value? It's just your segments are too broad. You're in the wrong customer segment. Or does the product need to change, right? Do I actually need these key features? If the customer and value prop is right, then do we need to actually get the product to a different point? So we start to diagnose the where you're at and where you're struggling based on these kind of different fits, right? Do I have the right distribution? And again, it depends on what you're willing to lock in. Some people, like second-time founders who've already exited, sometimes what they'll do is they'll actually say, I'm going to build a company around my channel, right? So I'm going to lock in distribution. Once I get distribution, I'd rather have a great distribution with a crappy product than a great product with no distribution, right? So there's all these different kind of, these are interrelated, but it's what are you anchoring into? If it's, I'm going to fix my product because my product is what it is, and I need to figure out the variable then becomes which customer I go after, and then how do I shape the value prop for the product I have? A lot of times it's what you have. That's why you get into these segmentation questions and repositioning and differentiation questions, because we already have a product, and now which customer segment and value prop are going to get me to my growth goals. And also pricing and upselling, but it really kind of depends on what stage you're at. What fits you have and don't have. So I hope some of that makes sense. Andrew, any other kind of thoughts on that? This is a whole thing that we would want to unpack, and there's a whole series of things to discuss in each of these fits. This really kind of go down a big rabbit hole, but this is kind of the higher level mental model we would use to work through this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it's all interrelated and kind of goes into, this next question we had. But essentially, like, your go-to-market is everything your company does, like who you're serving, how you're serving them. The differentiation is, understanding the nuances enough to be able to differentiate in their eyes, where you're reaching them, right? Like, everything's interrelated. So I think, as we think about this next question, what are some common misconceptions is that it's just channel. It's just how you're going to go find the people that you're serving, when really it's more nuanced than that. And people kind of take these broad segments and say, I'm going to go tackle this whole market, rather than those very specific segments that are going to, help you penetrate faster, give you higher return on investment, especially in this economic climate that we're moving into. What you do and don't do in your product, and on your team is going to be more important than ever, because if you're trying to get the cash flow positive, the best way to do that is going to be serving a really small niche in the best way possible, versus serving a ton of, the largest market possible in a ton of different ways, because that stretches your entire team. As you go back to that delivery model, that kind of funnel, the two-sided funnel, Ryan, that customer journey, if you're going after different markets and even different people in that, like, marketing messages are different, more landing pages, sales is having more calls, like, you're trying to optimize for open rates. If you're doing outbound, closing's more unpredictable because you don't have the right message. Then you're onboarding different clients and they have different compliance needs, potentially their legal review is different, right? It starts to bleed into your entire business when you're serving all these different people. And so your go-to-market is so connected that, most cases, if you can start right, if you looked at some of our early stage content, we recommend starting with the customer first, defining the customer, defining the problem, starting there, versus what a lot of founders do is start with the product. And then you kind of have to figure out, how do I massage, this product into something that can become a go-to-market strategy, right? And that's even part of one of our tests here for product strategy is starting with a technology and trying to find, because it is so common that you get really married to the idea you have or the value that you think you can provide, and go the other way. So I think the biggest misconception, at least that I see, is that it's just the channel. And it really is, the whole way you show up to people and how your team operates.
Yeah. I think we've it's a language thing. What we call go to market, is really business model level stuff, right? It's your whole business in a lot of way. Some people will just think, like you said, it's just a launch campaign, or it's my next campaign, or right. Just the channel, and it's way bigger than that, because it affects every single aspect of your business. Is figuring out the upstream stuff is so important. Yeah, so we're doing a lot more content on this stuff right now. We're working through, hey, what are the symptoms of poor go-to-market strategy? And there's just so many, and this is the kind of stuff that really matters. We can talk about the product and features and prioritization and all of that, and all that's great and good. But the bigger picture really, and how are you going to get to your growth goals? And what we've seen kind of over and over is that, the pressure for growth drives these different teams to expand, into accounts that are poorly qualified, right? Or the low quality SQLs, lower conversion rates, which results in higher acquisition costs. And it's all this pressure to grow, but without rethinking that once you hit a new market segment, you really need to think about, how am I positioned in there, repositioning, all of this really is iterative as that growth pressure hits, to make sure that we're not just, early on, you'll sell to anybody, early on it's, hey, who wants to buy? You're still figuring it out. You're just getting traction. And then you start to hit a stride where now you have different types of customers, and now I need to make a decision on where am I going to go to really get the growth I need.
Yeah, and I think like out of those early customers, you can do a lot of learning, both by customers you intended to serve and those who signed up and bought, and you were surprised by just, where are those segments? What are the things that they're using your product for that you never would have guessed, that give you more ideas to say, well, I didn't even know this was possible or this was a thing. What's the market like for that? Somebody's kind of strong arming your product into doing something specific, even though it wasn't designed for that. And I think that's a good area to watch, kind of get some eyes on as you go to, figure out your segments. Because early on, you're trying to figure out who would buy this, who's willing to pay me money to solve this problem, and then see what they actually do in the level of success, and then figure out, okay, where do we go from here?
Yeah, and you think about, your current customers that like have really high NPS or really high engagement rates or really high, referral rates. So they're just really happy with what you're doing. The question becomes like, why are the other customers really like, why are they here? What initially got them interested, and why are they leaving, right? You think about churn, you think about like low activation rates. There's probably some gold in here that you need to figure out. This is where we were bringing like customer research, something like that, to figure out, hey, why did you buy? And the customer, the market probably sees something in your product that they're trying to pull your product into their world, a world that you might not really understand, right? If you can understand what these guys are trying to achieve and what that world really looks like, and you might be able to win in this larger market segment if you understood some of those key things about their world or made some key changes. It might be language, it might be pricing, it might be some features, right? That would make them feel a lot more comfortable. And this might be a good pivot, right? So it's not to say, well, we'll stop serving these guys, but what will it take to move on? If this is a beachhead strategy, what would it take to move from here to here, right? And maybe some of the people that are in our funnel right now that we know are actually, they're just, they're great qualified leads. We've heard startups talk about this, where they have some really high quality leads come in and they're ready to buy and they're late stage in their buying journey, but the product's just not a good fit for them. And even if they take them on and actually bring them in, it's not going to serve the customer well. It's not going to serve the account exec or the support team well, and all it's going to do is create frustration for everybody. So it's actually better to disqualify those people and say, hey, maybe in the future we'll be ready for you, right? But not today. And I think that the hunger for revenue now, if the sales team's just chasing that, it's easier for them just to take the revenue and say, not my job, it's the product's fault, and just push the product features and just, well, we just need to hire, 50 more developers to get this stuff done. All this stuff rolls downstream. And if we just think about, well, if we actually moved and were able to make this market segment really work, there's a few things we need to change, then I might actually disqualify this group right now, even though we'd be losing out, but we're gaining a lot bigger segment over here, right? So what you don't want to do is have your sales team waste their time on people that are not going to be a good fit or unqualified in some way. So these are kind of some thoughts about market segmentation. And if anyone wants copies of this stuff, we're happy to do that. If you want to reach out and have conversations, I think we mentioned some of the things today. Or, hey, it depends on your context, and it depends on which of that small niche market you're going after. It's kind of hard on here, not knowing what that is, but feel free to hit us up, and we're happy to have a conversation and talk about specifics that would be applicable to you.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we have about 9 minutes left. And there were two other common questions we wanted to go through. If that's okay with you too, we can kind of make them fast answers, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool. All right. So this next one, does go-to-market change if you're B2B or B2C or product or service?
I mean, it's always changing, right? As we said, but I do think, the biggest factor here, is, I think the biggest difference, just as you think about the scale of these, the price point is probably the bottom two are the ones that change the most, in that the monetization and the different options, right? As you think about business models, freemium or free, or you think about, channel distribution and scale. If you're B2B, getting the customer and the product right, I feel like it's important in both scenarios. But getting the customer right and the nuances and the product to actually deliver on that value, you can have a little bit more flexibility in the channel with outbound sales, inbound content, trade shows, associations, right? You have a few more gates to go to when you think about B2C, and just the price points in B2C usually being, let's say, $5 a month to $150 a month on the high side for different products and services. Channels become a little bit more flexible, where you can start to leverage things. And that's where you see a lot of these consumer products take off in TikTok or Twitter or other spaces, where you're not going to sell, high ticket 7-figure consulting, on something, predictably. Right. And so I think it does change, but in my mind and kind of in my opinion and what I've seen, it usually changes the monetization and channel the most, depending on your model, because you need to do so many things at such a low acquisition cost that those are usually the two that change. And Ryan, if you have any other thoughts to add there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, B2B and B2C is one way to look at it, and the other way is to look at it through a sales model perspective. This sales model being, higher price point, and the higher price point allows for different acquisition costs, different unit economics, right? So you can afford to have an outbound team actually, calling on these people, and it's more of a high touch, if you will, kind of white glove kind of sales approach, right? But when you move down here into, let's say, self-serve, that'd be B2C for sure, but also, SMB type stuff, where your price point's lower, which is going to force you into a different sales model. And the sales model is going to have to be a lot more self-serve, right? So your price point changes. And it all goes back to this. If the customer segment changes, if you're selling to enterprise versus consumers, that changes the monetization, right? It changes what you can charge. There's, all the channel changes as well for sure. So yeah, we've been doing a lot more, paid ads and stuff for a lot of stuff with like the B2B world and account-based marketing, channel. You can't just do, you can't do Facebook ads. You can't do any of that social stuff. The channel's totally different. The ability to target is different. So I would say yes, absolutely. And as far as products and services go, that would both be under. I could even rename this offering, if you will, just for the moment, just to explain that. But if you're selling a product, I think it absolutely changes versus a service, right? So if you're selling a service, you can probably get away with, having different value props or custom proposals, right, for different customers. When you're selling a product is about repeatability. It's about scale. It's really about doing one thing really, really well. And that's the, product-based companies. That's why it's a lot more difficult, because there are a lot more. You get to choose one thing that you can do well, or a couple things, and so making this decision becomes harder. But also, like, in services and in some type of products, like Andrew mentioned, it's a lot more network based, a lot more referral based. So all that depends on what you're selling. A lot of times our stuff, for instance, services based is a lot more referral based. So yeah, I would say for sure to think about the sales model is one way to think about it. not just B2C, because what we do find is that a lot of SMB companies actually end up kind of in this space, and they actually have to take a similar kind of path where they're not doing much hand-holding in the sales process and really thinking about, hey, how do we get really smooth onboarding? How do we make it so easy for people to do a demo or trial, right? Without having to talk to a salesperson. Do you actually list pricing on your page or not? Right? Can they actually do a free trial, right? And that's kind of where we talk about product-led growth and really automating that experience, and onboarding becomes a lot more important here. Whereas up here in an enterprise sale, pricing is probably not on your page. They're probably going to have to do a discovery call to even figure out what your pricing is, and your pricing is probably going to be different depending on the customer, right? It's not published. So for sure, your go-to-market, your pricing, your channels, and how high or low touch you are is going to be different.
One thing, Ryan, that just came to me is, when someone has a great go-to-market, when they can sell through this really enterprise sales process and then pivot into product-led growth because of how much they understand the nuances. If you tried to do product-led growth with multiple segments, even at the same product or multiple categories, you're not going to be successful because, in a sales process, you have the ability to add nuance and overcome objections and talk about how this applies to them. In your onboarding process, if it's, single track or even, dual track, where you might have a couple doors to enter, you have to be really specific for them to be successful. And so I think there's a lot of companies that we're seeing now starting to make that jump or have that desire to make that jump. And really the first part is, do you understand enough about the existing world in your go-to-market for you to then bake that into, an automated process?
Yeah, for sure. We've seen, Series A companies, that are targeting enterprise today. They know that when they go raise Series B, their strategy is to actually go down market into here, right? And to take that same capabilities and sell it down market. And it is, you can't answer objections over the website. You really have to know what those questions are, what their objections are going to be ahead of time, right? Yeah. So there's trade-offs to both, right? These guys are probably harder to get in the phone because there's fewer of them, and right, the dollar sizes are a lot larger. Whereas to do customer discovery, it's actually easier to do down here, easier to target and run experiments as well. So there's trade-offs to both. But a lot of times it's faster. This is why a lot of B2B SaaS companies, you can charge higher price points, which means faster break even, those kinds of things. But then we do see a pattern of wanting to go down market and expand from there.
Yeah, and I think even some of our past customers, where they launched their entire offering on leaders in the industry that were very close to enterprise sales, enterprise partnerships. But that was a limiting factor because every time they weren't true SaaS. Every time that they added a client, they had to add 5 to 10 people to the team to support that client. And your margins get squeezed, right? Cash flow is tough. Then you start to move into this transactional self-serve market to go actually down market. So there's definitely a lot of benefits, but you can't do that unless you really have that, key focus in who you're serving.
Well, I think we can wrap things up. We're on the dot. It's noon our time. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks Ryan and Andrew for sharing all of your expertise and experience and thoughts on go-to-market. And as they said, we definitely have a lot more we want to share with all of you in the near future. So be on the lookout for that. So be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, leave your comments. We're going to have this recording available on the YouTube channel soon as well. And if you subscribed or registered for this event, we'll be sending you an email with the recording and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so thanks again, everyone. We'll be back again next month. We'll be talking about finding the right metrics to target. What are the metrics in your product or your startup do you need to focus on to kind of unlock growth? And then how do you take that metric and create a team around that metric to make an impact and truly grow the business, not just get more customers that end up leaving all the time. So really good stuff. We're excited to talk about that on June 15th. So, subscribe to the channel and look out on our website as well. So thanks again, everyone. Anything else you want to share, Ryan or Andrew?
Nothing from me. Thanks again. Yeah, this was great.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.